Now under Preferences, there are a whole bunch of different things that you can choose and customize, but I'd like to just show you some of the most useful and handy that are in here. This is very important. There's an Autosave option over on the Advanced tab, and if you'd like, you can set it so that it saves your work automatically every few minutes, whether it's 10 or 20 or much more in increments. So 10 is a pretty good amount of time. You'll be surprised how often 10 minutes comes and goes. So it may actually be too often for some people, but if you don't want to take a chance on losing your work, you can set that to 10 on autosave. Some of the other things that are really helpful are the colors that you'll see in your interface here. They help to determine the difference between different scenes, and the way to change all these, and you'll want to play with them, is to just double tap on a color that you'd like to change. So let me say that this color down below, that is the scene group box, color 1 and color 2. You can see I don't care for these because they're very similar in color. They're just different shades of gray. So to change one of them, I'll choose the gray, and let's say I want to make it kind of orange so it really stands out. I press OK, and then for box 2, I'll change that into a complementary color, something that will also really stand out. And then once I've chosen to revise those, I'll press OK, and now you can see that there's a huge difference on this timeline, so that it's easy for me to differentiate between scenes. It's easier to see also if I go to this view. And what this tells me is that everything in orange is one scene, and then the blue is the following scene, and then orange and blue. It helps to keep things alternating. It's a lot easier to see how your scenes are divided. So that's under Preferences. Let's see what else is there. That's really handy to know. All right, so that's under Global UI, and that means Global User Interface. And you have choices for all of these things. Under Camera is another one that I think is hugely important, and that is the option to show the status bar. This is a really, really handy tool, and when I press OK and return to the drawing view, you'll see why, because this right here is the status bar. And the status bar just lets you do so many things. First of all, it will tell you at a glance which tool you have selected. So I'm on the Select tool now. If I'm using the brush, I'm using the Brush tool. It's a good reminder. It also will tell you what color you're using. You can quickly change the size without having to use the keys or the menu items. Also Fit to View. You have other options regarding project, scene, and panel, but this is a good one, is the rotation reset. If you had gone here and rotated your view, you could just quickly tap that button to reset the rotation. By the same token, if you had zoomed in quite a bit, I'm going to use the zoom tool, which is in the same place as the hand. Let's say I had zoomed in really closely to work on something. If I want to quickly reset it, all I have to do is tap that little button and it has quickly reset. You can apply the grid by tapping the grid. You can apply the TV safe lines. This doesn't affect the actual artwork itself. It's just like an overlay. This is nice, is the mat that covers the drawing. It can sometimes give you a different view of how your drawings will look when they have that mat firmly placed on them. Now there are hundreds of preferences like these, so just to take you through the highlights of the preference box. Of course, in the first tab are all the shortcuts that we saw. In the General tab, there's things like Enable Acts, which is something that is commonly used. Also, you have the choice of whether or not you want to draw on the panel thumbnails when you see them. Here is a preference about the 3D features to enable these 3D functionalities. If this is not checked, and by default it's not checked, then the 3D features are not going to show up on your interface. But if you do want to work in 3D projects, then make sure that that is checked to enable those 3D functionalities every time that you use the program. But you do have to close and reopen the project for that to take effect. Another preference with a similar effect is this option to automatically create a new sequence. So if this is not enabled, then sequences will not be created, new sequences will not be created by default. But if you do want that to happen, just put a check mark next to automatically create new sequence. Under advanced is that autosave we talked about, which is really important. Under global UI, which is the global user interface, we talked about most of the colors are the things that will be helpful. The camera tab is the one that contains the status bar, which is very, very important. Also, you can control your onion skin colors here. This is another box I recommend checking off and perhaps playing with it. Enable global layer navigation. Allows you, when you're working on different scenes, or different panels I should say, to be always working on the same layer that you were previously. Under the Tools tab, I also recommend you use the lasso selection as default. So those are a quick look at the Preferences panel, and over time as you work with the program you'll just want to change different things. I wouldn't try to do it all at the beginning because there's so much to take in until you've gotten really, really comfortable with all the different choices that you can make.